What if I told you that the war between Israel and Hamas isn't just about land or religion? What if there's something much darker at play? Something that has been hidden in plain sight for decades? Behind every conflict is a story, and behind this one lies a tangled web of history, power, and ideological warfare. The battle between Israel and Hamas isn't as clear-cut as the media often portrays. It's not just a dispute over territory or religion. It's a deeper, far more insidious clash over identity, survival, and control. To understand it, we need to dive into the past, into the untold history of secret negotiations, hidden alliances, and forces that continue to fuel this invisible war. But where did it all begin? The answer isn't as simple as drawing lines on a map. While Israel and Hamas are the two primary players, this conflict is influenced by powers and ideologies from all corners of the world. So what fuels this ongoing struggle? Is it really just about the land, or is there a deeper ideological rift, a clash of civilizations that no one's willing to openly acknowledge? And why, despite countless peace talks and ceasefires, does the cycle of violence continue? Let's begin the exploration. To fully understand the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, we must first look at the historical backdrop of this region. This story does not begin in the 20th century, or with the formation of Hamas, but much earlier, where complex interactions of empire, religion, and colonialism set the stage for the wars and ideologies we see today. The modern conflict can trace its roots to the early 20th century, when the Middle East was carved up by colonial powers in the aftermath of World War I. Prior to this, Palestine had been part of the Ottoman Empire for centuries, a multi-ethnic society where Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted, albeit with tension for centuries. However, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire left a power vacuum that European powers were eager to fill. In 1917, at the height of World War I, the British government made a landmark decision that would alter the course of history in the region, the Balfour Declaration. The declaration promised British support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. At this time, there was already a significant Jewish population in Palestine, but the larger Arab population was deeply opposed to Jewish immigration, fearing it would lead to their displacement. The Balfour Declaration, rather than resolving the tensions, added a layer of complexity by giving conflicting promises to both Jews and Arabs in the region. To the Arabs, Britain promised independence for the lands of the former Ottoman Empire, including Palestine, in exchange for their support against the Ottomans in the war. This left the Arabs in a precarious situation. On one hand, they were promised sovereignty. On the other, they were confronted by Jewish settlers with the support of the world's most powerful empire. This tension, seeded by imperial interests and promises made to both sides, festered throughout the British Mandate period, from 1917 to 1948. During this time, Jewish immigration to Palestine increased dramatically, particularly in the aftermath of the Holocaust. The rise of Nazi anti-Semitism and the horrors of the Holocaust only intensified Jewish aspirations for a homeland, and the British government, overwhelmed by the escalating violence, eventually withdrew from the region. When Israel declared its independence in 1948, the decision set the region on fire. The United Nations had proposed a partition plan to divide Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, but this was vehemently rejected by the Arab world. Instead, upon Israel's declaration of independence, neighboring Arab states, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, launched a military intervention in an attempt to prevent the creation of Israel. The ensuing war, known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, or the War of Independence as it's called in Israel, led to a decisive Israeli victory, but at a cost. The war resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, a tragedy known as the Nakba, or catastrophe, for the Arab world. The Palestinians, who had lived in the region for generations, saw themselves as the victims of a foreign colonization project backed by Western powers. This event left a permanent scar on the Palestinian psyche, creating generations of refugees and setting the foundation for a deep-seated animosity toward Israel. However, the creation of Israel and the failure of the Arab states to prevent it also began a new geopolitical era in the region. The Arab world, particularly in the years following the war, experienced a series of defeats that tarnished their standing and left them fractured. But while Israel established itself as a military power in the region, the Palestinians, both in the occupied territories and in the refugee camps, felt the sting of dispossession and exile. Fast forward to the late 20th century. After the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, emerged as the primary voice of Palestinian nationalism in the 1960s, a new movement, more radical in nature, arose in the Gaza Strip. This movement was Hamas, an acronym for the Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, or the Islamic Resistance Movement. Founded in 1987 during the First Intifada, the Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation, Hamas was initially an offshoot of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, but its ideological roots ran deeper. Hamas's primary goal was not merely to resist Israeli occupation, it sought to dismantle Israel entirely, viewing the creation of the Jewish state as a direct affront to Islam. For Hamas, the struggle against Israel was not just territorial, but also ideological. The movement espoused an Islamic vision of a Palestinian state where Sharia law would be the foundation of governance. Their strategy for achieving this was radical armed resistance and jihad, often targeting civilians and using suicide bombings as a form of warfare. Hamas rejected the more secular diplomatic approach of the PLO and its leader Yasser Arafat, viewing negotiations with Israel as treasonous. Hamas's rise coincided with a period of intense frustration among Palestinians. The PLO, despite its decades-long leadership of the Palestinian cause, had failed to bring about meaningful change. The Oslo Accords, which were signed in the 1990s as part of peace negotiations between Israel and the PLO, led to the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. But these accords fell short of Palestinian expectations. Many Palestinians felt that their leadership had sold them out, agreeing to terms that allowed Israeli settlements to expand in the West Bank and Gaza, while offering little in return. Hamas capitalized on this disillusionment, presenting itself as the true resistance movement, a defender of Palestinian identity and an uncompromising force against Israeli occupation. This ideological purity resonated deeply with a large segment of the Palestinian population, particularly in Gaza, where Hamas gained significant support in the early 2000s. In 2006, Hamas won a surprise victory in the Palestinian legislative elections, defeating the PLO's Fatah party and taking control of Gaza. This victory, however, was not met with peace. Rather, it solidified the division between the West Bank, governed by the Palestinian Authority, and Gaza, ruled by Hamas. At the heart of the Israeli-Hamas conflict lies not just a fight over territory, but a contest of ideologies. Each side believes that its existence is essential for the survival of its people, its culture, and its way of life. For Israel, the founding of the Jewish state was a historic necessity, a haven for Jews who had suffered centuries of persecution. The memory of the Holocaust and the failure of the international community to protect Jews from extermination reinforced Israel's desire to maintain a secure homeland. To this day, Israeli leadership justifies military actions in Gaza and the West Bank as necessary for the survival of the Jewish state in a region that remains hostile to its existence. For Hamas, the ideology is clear. The liberation of Palestine is not just a nationalistic cause, but a religious duty. Hamas views Israel as a foreign colonizer, a Western imposition on the land of the Muslims. They see themselves as warriors of Islam, fighting to reclaim what they believe is an Islamic territory. To Hamas, this is not merely a political struggle. It is a holy war, a jihad to preserve the purity of Islam and protect the sanctity of the land. Both Israel and Hamas also perceive the other as a threat to their identity. For Israel, the continued existence of Hamas represents an existential threat, one that questions the legitimacy of Israel as a Jewish state. For Hamas, Israel represents an unyielding force that seeks to erase Palestinian identity, to deny them their right to self-determination. As we enter the 21st century, the conflict has entered a new phase. Israel's security measures, including blockades and airstrikes, have pushed the people of Gaza to the brink. Israel's security measures, including blockades and airstrikes, have pushed the people of Gaza to the brink. Yet Hamas continues to carry out attacks, employing tactics that have led to widespread civilian casualties. Israel's technological and military superiority has created an asymmetry in the violence. Israel's Iron Dome defense system intercepts rockets, while Hamas relies on crude missiles and suicide bombers. The media often reports this violence, but it's hard to grasp the full scale of suffering on both sides. For the people of Gaza, life is a daily struggle for survival, while for Israelis, every rocket attack is a reminder that their security is under constant threat. But as the years pass, peace seems more elusive. The ideological divide between Israel and Hamas only grows wider, with no signs of compromise. While there are occasional peace talks, they rarely lead to lasting solutions. What began as a fight for land and survival has become an ideological war that no side seems willing to back down from. This invisible war, hidden beneath the surface of the headline news, is not just about geography. It is about the clash of two competing visions of the future. In the end, the Israel-Hamas conflict is a battle over far more than land or religion. It is a war over survival, identity, and ideology. Neither side can afford to lose, and both are entrenched in their beliefs. For Israel, it is a fight for the preservation of the Jewish state, for security, and for its right to exist in a hostile region. For Hamas, it is a fight for the liberation of Palestine and the protection of Islamic identity. The tragedy is that each side sees the other not only as a threat to their survival, but as an existential enemy. And so the war continues, not just in the fields and cities of Israel and Gaza. The invisible war continues, shaping the Middle East for generations to come, with no clear path to peace in sight. If you want to understand more about the hidden forces shaping the world today, subscribe for deeper dives into the unseen side of geopolitics.